That's right. But doesn't it strike the news media that while they are shoring up the buildings so that it won't collapse, why don't they go in and get the evidence and bring it back? I guess that's too much to ask. Are there no members of the military in the news media? I mean, guys who really went out and put it on the line? Bloody word that the politicians don't like to hear. Sovereignty rests in the individual. Well, the founders of this nation understood that. Our politicians today, most of them by and large, some few exceptions, don't understand it. The founding fathers held that noble ideal at the beginning of the Republic. We've lost it when they turned the country into a representative democracy. They don't want to define terms. They don't like to define terms because that means you have to deal in a real world when you define terms, and then you will be held accountable. So they've given us this representative democracy, which is nothing more than pressure group rule. And the patriots gathered here and elsewhere on this continent recognize that it may be incumbent upon them to take back the rights of free men, even if it means regaining those rights must be written in blood. Framers chose to build stability and national security on the presumption that most adult males would be personally armed, and women too. The potential for armed revolution was seen then and later as a safeguard. Now, afraid of congressional control, the militia at the Virginia Ratifying Convention, here's George Mason, who warned that the government, now believe me, this must have been hard for George Mason to postulate, because he wondered, when he warned that the government might gradually increase its power by totally disusing and neglecting the militia. And Patrick Henry, fellow anti-federalist, agreed. Patrick Henry was always stressing that a Congress that controlled the militia could prevent popular rebellion against federal tyranny. And he said, militia is our ultimate safety. The great object is that every man be armed. Everyone who is able may have a gun. Well, you know, well-regulated militia would be an effective citizen militia. And well-regulated means that the militia would hit their target. It means they would be proficient in those weapons. Now we find ourselves at a point here in identifying who's the militia. Well, in 1939, the decision the Supreme Court noted the historical understanding of the militia, the most able-bodied citizens would be personally armed, would train together and serve together in an emergency. This includes the sheriffs. This includes the state police. This includes the local law enforcement personnel. They're all part of the militia. They're the body of men and women at large. It includes all of us. And let me tell you, keep this in mind, we're all in this kennel together. Doesn't make any difference whether you're black, whether you're white, what your skin color is, what religion you observe or don't observe. The unanimous court wrote the militia comprised all males physically capable of acting in concert for the common defense. Ordinarily, when called for service, these men were expected to appear bearing arms, supplied by themselves and of the kind in common use at the time. So now you and I are asked to compromise. We're asked to compromise this right that you and I have. You have a right to your life. Nobody has a right to take your life from you. That's why this nation is so great. Because that right is yours simply because you're born. Heaven didn't give you that right. Bill Clinton didn't give you the Constitution doesn't give you that right. It just spells it out. That's all. That right is yours. You own it. So the founders knew that if you had a right, Cicero knew it, if you had a right to your life, then you have a right to protect your life. As much as we would like to believe that we can live in a peaceful society and we don't need to be armed citizens, because let me tell you something, it is a pain to be walking around carrying guns. You ask any law enforcement officer, and especially at the end of the day, he's glad to take it off. So we would like to live in a peaceful society. But we know that reality dictates otherwise. We know that we don't have a peaceful society. So you have a right to be able to defend yourself if necessary, but you better be able to defend yourself in a court of law as well. In other words, you better be able to prove that you were defending yourself, you were defending your life, and that you were under attack. When we come to the word individual and such, and I think this needs to be defined, we're going to go back to Alexis de Tocqueville, because he invented the word individualism when he wrote the book Democracy in America. This is where the argument breaks down. This is where the news media loses us. They cannot or will not understand the difference between what is going on in America and what that noble ideal was about and what goes on in the rest of the world. Because in the rest of the world, statism is supreme. Now, here in this country, we too see statism. And it's creeping in. But you still have news media people saying, what are you afraid of? What do you mean, statism? What is statism? We have more freedom now than we've ever had, Bill Bond said to me. And all Bill Bonds has to do is go back to the 19th century and do the study of history of this country in the 19th century. And I think he would come to the conclusion that, my God, we had more freedoms then than we have now. How can that be? So what is this individualism stuff that they talk about? Individualism regards every man, every woman as an independent, sovereign entity who possesses the inalienable right to his own life. This comes from your nature as a rational being. That's why we form governments, because we want to be rational. We want to get along. We want to work with one another. We want trade. We want agreements. We are contractual animals, if you will. And we want to live in peaceful coexistence among men. So this can be achieved only on the basis of the recognition of individual rights, not group rights, individual rights. If you don't honor individual rights, you'll never have group rights. The group as such has no rights other than the individual members that are a collective element of that group. And this is where they go sour. This is where they go wrong. They don't seem to understand that there is a means whereby you can see that individual rights is moral. It's a moral principle that defines and sanctions man's freedom of action. Again, what is noble about this country? There's only one fundamental right. All the others become a part of it. They're corollaries. They're consequences of the fundamental right of a man to his own life. And the right of life means the right to engage in self-sustaining and self-generated action, which means you have the freedom to fulfillment. You have the freedom to the enjoyment of your life. That's what the meaning of right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is about.